I was born in a small village just outside Kano, in northern Nigeria. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. From as far back as I can remember, my life revolved around the mosque. My father was the chief imam of our village mosque, and from childhood, I was trained to follow in his footsteps. Every morning, before the sun rose, I could hear his voice calling me from across the small courtyard, telling me to prepare for far prayer. The sound of water from the ablution taps, the feel of the cold floor against my feet, the faint smell of burning firewood from nearby kitchens, these were all part of my daily life. Islam wasn't just my religion. It was my identity. It was the air I breathed. By the age of 7, I had memorized large portions of the Quran. My teachers would praise me in front of the other boys, calling me Little Sheikh. I remember the long hours sitting cross-legged on the woven mat in the madrasa, reciting verses until my voice grew hoarse. My teachers were strict but fair. They believed discipline was the only way to shape a proper servant of Allah. My father was even stricter. His expectations for me were clear: one day, I would lead prayers just as he did. One day, I would carry the responsibility of guiding souls toward the truth. As I grew older, I found respect in our community. People greeted me with honor. They listened when I spoke. I led prayers, gave sermons on Fridays, and taught children at the madrasa. People brought me food from their homes as gifts, and during Ramadan, my schedule was full of teaching, praying, and fasting. From the outside, it looked like I had everything a man could want: a purpose, a respected position, and the assurance that I was serving God faithfully. But inside, there was something I dared not speak about. A quiet emptiness I couldn't explain. Late at night, after the prayers were done and the mosque was silent, I often sat alone under the stars, questioning things I had never dared to question before. Why did Allah feel distant, even though I spent my entire life serving Him? Why did the words I repeated every day feel like rituals, not conversations? There were moments when I wondered if I was doing something wrong. I kept these thoughts hidden. I couldn't let anyone know. Doubt, after all, was dangerous. It could ruin not just my reputation but my very soul. There was one memory that never left me. I was about 30 years old then. It was during Ramadan. After leading the evening prayer, I went to visit an old man named Al-Haji Musa who had fallen ill. He was a respected elder and a devout Muslim. As I sat beside him, he grabbed my hand tightly and whispered, "Yusuf, what if we are wrong?" His eyes were wide with fear, his voice trembling. I remember pulling my hand away, scolding him softly, telling him to seek forgiveness for such words. But when I left his house that night, his question followed me. It echoed in my mind for days, for months, and eventually, for years. Still, I pushed the thoughts aside. I buried them under more prayers, longer fasts, deeper study. I told myself that the questions were from Shaitan. I told myself that Allah was testing me. I tried harder to please Him, to silence the doubts that gnawed at my soul. Life continued in this way for many years. By the time I was 40, I had become the chief imam after my father passed away. People looked to me for answers, for guidance. But deep inside, I was a man searching for peace I couldn't find. I longed for something more, though I didn't know what that more was. I thought perhaps I needed to be a better Muslim, a more faithful servant. Perhaps then, Allah would grant me the peace my soul craved. Looking back now, I realize that those restless nights, those silent tears, those questions I dared not voice, were the beginning of my journey. A journey I never planned to take. A journey that would change my life forever. At that time, I had no idea what awaited me on the other side of death.
Friends, before we continue, let me welcome you to Mysterious Uplift, the channel where real stories meet the unseen world. If you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss testimonies like this, stories that might challenge what you believe about life, death, and what lies beyond. Now, let Yusuf take you deeper into his own story. A story he never thought he would share someday?
It happened on a Friday morning. A day I remember clearer than any other. I had just finished leading the early prayers at the mosque. My chest felt tight, but I ignored it. I thought maybe it was the fasting, or just exhaustion from the long night before. I went back home and sat under the neem tree in front of my house, as I always did. But that morning felt different. Something wasn't right. Minutes later, I felt a sharp, crushing pain across my chest. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt. My breathing grew heavy, my vision blurred. My wife, Zainab, came running when she heard me collapse. I could barely hear her voice calling my name, her hands shaking me, trying to wake me. Then came the frantic footsteps of my sons, Musa and Haruna, as they lifted me into the back of a neighbor's pickup truck. I remember the dust rising behind the speeding truck as they rushed me toward the general hospital in Kano City. I was fading, but I could still hear the shouts, the cries, the desperate prayers recited over me as we drove. When we reached the hospital, I remember being pulled onto a stretcher. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room burned my eyes. Nurses rushed around me. I heard the voices of doctors shouting instructions in Hausa and English. Needles, machines, masks, I was aware of all of it, yet I felt far from it, as if watching from somewhere else. The pain in my chest intensified until I thought I would be crushed under its weight. And then, everything changed. I heard a long, continuous tone. A flat line. I remember hearing that sound, knowing in some part of my mind what it meant. The doctors stopped moving. My wife's cries filled the room. I saw the nurse cover my face with the white hospital sheet. That's when the silence came. Complete silence. Yet, I was awake. I could still hear, but not through my ears. I could see, but not with my eyes. I found myself standing. Though I had no body, in the very room where I had just died. I could see my lifeless form on the bed. I could see Zainab kneeling beside me, her face buried in her hands. I saw Musa standing against the wall, shaking, his lips moving as he whispered the Shahida over and over again. But what terrified me wasn't seeing them. What terrified me was realizing they couldn't see me. I tried to call out, to touch them, to let them know I was there. But I had no voice. No hands. I watched helplessly as they mourned me. And then, the room began to fade. Everything became darker, not like a nightfall, but like being swallowed into a vast emptiness. I felt myself pulled backwards. I wasn't walking. I wasn't floating. I was simply moving. Faster than I could understand. The hospital disappeared. The world I knew was gone. What replaced it was silence so thick I felt it pressing against me. I remember thinking, is this death? Is this the end? I felt fear. A fear unlike anything I had ever known. And then, in that darkness, I heard a sound. It started faint, like distant thunder. It grew louder. Not a frightening sound, but powerful. A voice. It called my name. Yusuf. I was certain no human had spoken. It was not Arabic. It was not Hausa. It was not any language I understood. And yet, I knew exactly what it said. It said my name. The voice was neither harsh nor soft. It was commanding, but not condemning. Authoritative, yet filled with something I could not describe. And then, in that endless darkness, I saw light. At first, it was just a single point. But as it grew nearer, it consumed everything. Bright, brighter than anything I had ever seen. But it did not hurt my eyes. It did not burn. It felt warm. Pure. Then I realized. I wasn't alone. Someone stood in the center of that light. A figure. Human-like, yet not like any human I had known. His presence filled me with a mixture of awe and fear. And before I could speak, before I could question, the voice spoke again. I am the way. And at that moment, though he said no more, I understood. I don't know how I knew. But deep within me, I knew. I was standing before the one they called Isa. Jesus. But not as I had been taught. Not as a mere prophet. Not as a messenger among many. He stood there, as Lord. I wanted to fall. I wanted to kneel. But I had no knees. I had no body. And yet, I felt like my very soul was bowing. He looked at me, not with human eyes, but with something that saw deeper. I remembered every sin, every lie, every doubt I had buried. I remembered every sermon I had preached against Christians. And in that moment, I was certain I would be judged. I waited for his anger. I waited for his condemnation. But what came, broke me. Love. Pure. Unconditional. Unexplainable. He said only one thing more. You were searching, and now you have found. Tears, though I had no eyes, flowed. Tears from my soul itself. He extended his hand. Not physically. But I knew he was inviting me. But then. He said something that still shakes me to this day. Go back. I wanted to stay. Everything in me wanted to remain in that presence. But his voice gave no room for debate. Go back, and tell them. Tell them. What did he mean? And before I could ask, the light withdrew. I felt the weight of the world returning. I felt myself being pulled backwards. Falling. Falling. Until I heard something faint. A beeping. A steady, rhythmic beeping. I opened my eyes. The nurses screamed. Doctors rushed to my side. I gasped. I was alive. My wife collapsed beside me in tears. And all I could say, through cracked lips, was one word. Isa. Jesus. I was no longer the same. The first thing I remember after everything went dark was the strange feeling that I was still there, yet not there. I knew I was not breathing anymore. I could not feel my chest rising and falling, nor could I hear the sounds of the hospital around me. But somehow, I was still conscious. Fully aware. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but then suddenly, I felt like I was standing, though I had no legs to stand on. And there I was, looking down at something that didn't make sense at first. I saw people crying. I saw doctors moving around, shaking their heads. Then I saw a body lying there, lifeless on the hospital bed. It took me a few moments to understand. That was me. My own body. I tried to speak. I tried to move closer to my wife who was crying beside the bed, but no sound came out of my mouth. No hand reached out from me to touch her shoulder. I wasn't in the body that was lying on the bed anymore. A strange fear gripped me then. Not fear of what I saw, but fear of what I didn't understand. I kept thinking, what's happening to me? Am I dead? Then, everything around me began to fade. Slowly at first, like smoke clearing after a fire. The hospital room, the bed, the crying voices, they all disappeared. I was left standing in darkness. Real darkness. Not like night, not like the absence of light, but like something deeper. I don't know how to explain it even now. It felt endless. The kind of darkness that presses against you, even though you have no skin to feel it. There was no sound. No echo. Just silence. And me, floating or standing, I couldn't tell, in the middle of it all. I don't know how long I remained there. Time didn't seem to exist in that place. I felt fear creeping into me slowly. A fear I had never known before. I kept asking myself, is this where the soul waits? Is this Barzakh? I tried to remember everything I had been taught about the soul after death, but none of it seemed to explain what I was experiencing. I called out, though I had no voice. I remember thinking, Allah, where are you? Then, something happened. At first, it was faint. A sound, like wind but not wind. Like water, but not water. It grew louder. Not deafening, but strong enough that I knew something was coming. And then, I heard it. My name. Clear as day. Yusuf. It wasn't like anyone calling from far away. It was everywhere, surrounding me. It didn't come through ears. I heard it deep inside me. But I understood one thing immediately: this voice wasn't human. I tried to answer, but again, I couldn't speak. Then, from a distance that felt both near and far, a light appeared. It started small, but as it moved toward me, it grew brighter and brighter. I wanted to look away. I thought it would burn me. But it didn't. The closer it came, the warmer I felt. A warmth that wasn't physical, but something deeper. The darkness couldn't stand before it. Wherever the light moved, the darkness disappeared, as if it had never existed. And in the middle of that light, I saw someone. A figure. At first, I thought it was an angel. But the longer I looked, the more I realized this wasn't like anything I had ever known or seen. He wasn't floating. He wasn't winged. He stood like a man. But more than a man. I knew without anyone telling me, he was the reason for the light. The light came from him. It wasn't shining on him. He was the source of it. I stood there, unable to move, unable to hide. His presence was overwhelming. I felt like every part of me, every thought I'd ever had, was exposed. Like I couldn't hide even a single secret from him. And still, he looked at me. Not with eyes that could be described, but with a knowing that pierced through my very soul. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I expected judgment. I expected anger. But instead, what I felt, was love. A love so pure, so complete, that it broke me from the inside. I wasn't being punished. I wasn't being condemned. I was being known. Fully known. And still, loved. Then, he spoke. I am the way. Just that. Nothing more. But when he said those words, I understood. Not through learning, not through reasoning, but as if the knowledge was simply placed inside me. I knew. I knew exactly who he was. This was Jesus. Isa. But not the prophet I had preached about all my life. Not the messenger I had defended against Christians. This was Jesus, the Lord. I felt everything inside me crumble. My pride. My years of teaching. My certainty in my own knowledge. They all fell away in that moment. And for the first time in my life, I saw the truth. The one I had rejected stood before me, yet he did not reject me. I wanted to stay there forever. But then, something I never expected happened. He spoke again. Go back. Those two words filled me with confusion. Go back? Back to where? I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to return to whatever life I had known. Here, in his presence, I finally felt peace. I felt whole. But there was no arguing. Go back, and tell them. Tell them. Tell who? Tell what? I didn't know. But before I could say anything, before I could ask him even one question, the light began to pull away. Not as if it moved. But as if I was falling back from it. I reached out, though I had no hands. I cried, though I had no voice. I wanted to stay. I needed to stay. But I was falling. Faster and faster. The light grew smaller. The darkness returned. Then came the sound of a steady beep. And the sudden, crushing weight of my body. I gasped. Air flooded back into my lungs. I opened my eyes. The hospital lights were above me. I heard shouts. Voices crying out. Someone said, "He's breathing." And then I saw my wife's face, soaked in tears, leaning over me. I tried to speak. My throat burned. But somehow, I whispered the only word that mattered. Isa. And then, the tears flowed from my eyes. Because I knew. I had met him. And my life could never be the same again. The days after I came back from death were not what I expected. In the hospital, as I lay recovering, I replayed the encounter over and over again in my mind. I couldn't escape it. It was as real as the walls around me. More real, even. I remembered his face, not as human features I could describe, but the way he looked into me. The warmth of his presence. His words. Go back, and tell them. But what did that mean? Who was I supposed to tell? And how could I even begin? I didn't speak for the first 2 days after I woke up. My wife, Zainab, stayed by my side, holding my hand and crying softly. I could see the questions in her eyes. The fear. My sons visited in silence. They watched me carefully, as if trying to understand whether their father had truly returned from the dead or if some part of me had changed. And in truth, everything had changed. But how could I explain it? The first time I tried to speak about what happened, it was to Zainab. She leaned in, eager to hear my voice after days of silence. I remember whispering, "Zainab. I saw Isa." Her expression shifted instantly. She pulled her hand back as if my skin had burned her. She looked around the hospital room, making sure no one else had heard. Then she whispered sharply, "Don't say that." "I saw him," I said again, tears filling my eyes. "He sent me back." She shook her head. "No, no, Yusuf, this is Shaitan confusing you. You must seek forgiveness." I tried to explain. I told her about the darkness. About the voice calling my name. About the light. About Jesus standing before me, not as a prophet, but as Lord. I told her how he knew me, how he loved me. And how he sent me back. Zainab began to weep, not out of relief, but out of fear. By evening, my elder brother, Ibrahim, came to the hospital. Zainab must have told him something. He stood at the foot of my bed, arms crossed, eyes hard. "What is this madness I'm hearing?" he asked. I tried to explain. Again. But the more I spoke, the more their faces changed. From confusion, to fear, to anger. "Have you lost your mind, Yusuf?" Ibrahim shouted. "You are an imam. People look to you. And you are saying Jesus is God?" "I'm not saying it," I replied softly. "I saw him." The next morning, the elders of my community came. Friends I had prayed beside for years. Men who had honored me, respected me. They gathered around my bed, speaking to me like a patient who had lost his mind. They told me I had suffered a delusion. That I needed to repent. That perhaps I had died in a state of confusion and the devil had played tricks on me. But I couldn't lie. I couldn't deny what I saw. By the time I left the hospital, word had spread. My closest students avoided me. People who once greeted me with smiles now looked away when I approached. I became a stranger in my own village. One evening, as I sat quietly under the neem tree, Zainab came to me with tears in her eyes. She told me she could no longer stay. That my refusal to recant what I was saying was putting the family in danger. She said the community believed I had apostatized. That they would not allow her or the children to live with a man who had betrayed Islam. I pleaded with her. I told her I hadn't betrayed anything. That I had found the truth. That I needed her. But her heart was broken. She left that night with our sons. I watched them walk away, their figures disappearing down the dirt road, carrying only what they could hold in their arms. I was alone. Soon after, threats began to come. Notes left at my door. Stones thrown at my windows in the middle of the night. Old friends turned into enemies. I understood the danger I was in. Apostasy, in our community, wasn't just shameful, it was punishable. I began sleeping with one eye open, waiting for the day someone would decide to end my life. Yet, despite the fear, despite the loneliness, I couldn't deny him. How could I? I saw him. I met him. He sent me back. Many nights, I sat awake, questioning everything. Asking God why he allowed me to see what I saw, if it meant losing everything. My family. My community. My purpose. But in the silence, in the darkness of those lonely nights, I remembered his words. Go back, and tell them. Even now, I didn't know how. I didn't know who would listen. But I knew I had to try. Even if no one believed me. Even if it cost me my life. I had to obey. In the months that followed, I lived like a man caught between two worlds. I left the village quietly, without saying goodbye. I knew if I stayed, would not survive. I moved to Kaduna, a city where no one knew my name, where I could walk the streets without the weight of my past suffocating me. There, in a small rented room, I began to rebuild my life, not as an imam, not as a teacher of Islam, but as a man searching for the Jesus who had met me in the light. At first, I kept everything inside. I was too afraid to speak to anyone. I was a former imam. Who would believe me? Who could understand? I carried the memories of my encounter like a secret treasure and a heavy burden at the same time. I read the only Bible I could find, an old, tattered one that I bought from a street vendor. Every word felt new, yet familiar. The verses spoke directly to my soul in a way nothing ever had before. I read the Gospel of John again and again. When I read Jesus' words, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I wept, because those were the words he had spoken to me. I had lost everything, my wife, my sons, my community, but for the first time in my life, I felt peace. A peace that wasn't based on performance. Not on rituals. Not on being good enough. It was a peace that came simply from knowing him. The one who loved me even when I rejected him. But peace wasn't enough. I knew what he had told me. Go back, and tell them. So after many months of fear and silence, I found a small house church in the outskirts of the city. They didn't know who I was when I first walked in. I didn't look like a Christian. My clothes, my mannerisms, they all spoke of my past. But when I shared my story with the pastor in private, he didn't judge me. He wept with me. He prayed with me. And slowly, I began to understand that God had not only saved me, he had prepared a purpose for me. At first, I shared my story only within that small church. Quietly. Cautiously. I stood trembling the first time I spoke before them. But when I told them about the darkness, the voice calling my name, the light, and the face of Jesus, I saw tears in their eyes. They believed me. For the first time, I wasn't alone. With time, the fear began to fade. I realized silence was disobedience. So I began to speak. Not just inside the church walls, but outside. In marketplaces. On street corners. Anywhere someone would listen. I shared what I had seen, what I had heard, what I had felt. And the more I spoke, the more I felt alive. People called me mad. Some laughed. Some threatened. But I kept speaking. Because Jesus was real. And his love was too deep, too powerful, for me to keep hidden. I spoke in taxis. I spoke in shops. I spoke to strangers who stared at me in disbelief. I told them I was an imam. I memorized the Quran. I believed Islam was the truth. But I died. I saw death. I met the one I had rejected. And his name is Jesus. The words burned in my chest until I spoke them. I wasn't trying to convert anyone. I was simply telling the truth. The truth that saved me. Today, I stand before the world with nothing to hide. I am Yusuf Ibrahim. I once led prayers in a mosque. Now, I follow Jesus. Not because someone preached to me. Not because I read a book. But because I met him. He found me in the darkness. He called my name. And he loved me. No matter what it costs me, I will keep telling the world. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the truth. Jesus is the life. I saw him. I know him. And I will never be the same again. Today, my life is simple. I no longer stand before large crowds in mosques. I no longer carry the title of imam. I live quietly in a small house on the edge of the city, surrounded by people who now call me brother. Each morning, I sit under the same kind of tree where I once questioned my purpose. But now, my heart is at peace. I wake up not with fear of whether my prayers will be accepted, but with the joy of knowing I am already loved, fully, completely, by the one who gave his life for me. I spend my days reading the Bible, sometimes for hours, letting the words sink deep into my soul. The same soul that once doubted, now rests. I join my small community of believers each week. We worship, we pray, and we break bread together, not in ritual, but in love. And each time I share my story, whether to one person or to many, I remember why I was sent back. This peace I have now is not something I earned. It's not something I found by being a good man. It is grace. Pure grace. I had nothing left when Jesus found me. I had lost everything. And yet, in him, I gained everything I never knew I needed. From a devoted imam, to a fearless follower of Jesus. My journey is proof that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. Not me. Not you. No matter your past. No matter your doubts. No matter how far you've walked from the truth. If you're watching this now, I believe it's not by chance. Jesus is calling. He is the light in your darkness. He is the voice calling your name. He is the one who loves you more than you can understand. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I saw him. I met him. And I know, if you seek him with an open heart, you will find him too. So I ask you now, what are you waiting for? Right where you are, ask him to show you the truth. Because once you know him, nothing in your life will ever be the same again. This is Mysterious Uplift. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share this story, and help us spread the light. Your journey might just begin today.